Hey everybody. So if you're watching this, maybe you've also seen the handful of previous recordings where Dr. Taryn Hess and I have been writing our paper on data literacy in the age of generative AI, and we've been talking about it. We've done a handful of key podcasts and things like that. I'm joined today by both Taryn and Mike Cooke, who's the CEO of Brandon Hall, and it's my pleasure, of course, to be talking about data literacy with both of you. Before we go into the meat of the discussion, would you like to intro yourselves? Mike, would you like to go first?
Sure. For those that don't know us, Brandon Hall Group has been around for nearly 30 years. We're a leading voice in HR and learning and talent research, and we work with clients on strategy, technology, as well as data. And I'm happy to be here. I think we're diving into a topic that's really very critical as AI reshapes our world in data literacy.
Absolutely. We couldn't agree more. Taryn, would you like to?
Completely. Very excited to have you with us, Mike.
Thank you.
Taryn, do you need an introduction? I guess most people will have seen our work before. You say a few words, why not?
Sure, why not? I mean, I probably do need an introduction. I don't know, maybe that's my mindset. But Dr. Taryn Hess, so I am passionate about all things data and literacy and talent and people. So of course, this is one of my favorite things to do, is to talk around what does this look like amongst all of the things that are happening in the world today? And how do we start to think about it and plan for it and make a change for the future that we know is coming? So I'm really excited to talk again. Well, to have Mike a part of our conversation that we've been having, Ashwin.
Yes,
absolutely. And just to intro the session a little bit. So special story, personally special for me. So about a year ago, I think it was February 24, which was the Brandon Hall Conference 2024. And I was fortunate enough to be on stage with Mike with doing a keynote panel for the conference. And we were talking about all of the things around AI. And if anybody remembers, back in 2024, AI was still this kind of emerging. We're in the middle of a revolution. The revolution's happening. Something is changing. We have disruption, and everybody needs to try and cope with that. And the flavor of that panel was very much around that. So how are we coping with this kind of thing in big companies? In small companies, what do we need to do? And me being me, I was talking a lot about things like data literacy. We need to get a good handle on data management. Data is the fuel for the AI engine. And while I was talking and Mike was steering this conversation, because obviously conversations like that with panels need to have a focus, and Mike was doing that very well, I could see in front of me, I could see the audience, and you see the audience participation, and I could see Taryn with her colleagues on the table nodding feverishly every time I was talking about data and the importance of data. And so big conferences happen, and you go and network and you talk. And we started talking, we hit it off. We had great chemistry in talking about data and data literacy. And we decided we have this idea, why don't we write a paper? Now, because of that connection, we had the conversation after we wrote the paper that why don't we loop back in with Mike and not only get the 2025 view, but also kind of pay a little bit of homage, pay a little bit of, thanks for introducing us at that event. So that's kind of why this is happening. So great story, personal anecdote.
Yeah.
So as we move forward into the meat of the discussion, let's start with the topic of data literacy itself. We've gone through the scripting of a paper. We've done some research. We've written that. And Mike has been kind enough to be one of the early reviewers of that paper. We think it's important, but what are we seeing in the landscape? How important is data literacy across human capital management broadly? Mike, what do you think?
I think it's foundational when you look at HR, learning, and talent, becoming more embedded in the ways that we're managing performance of teams, performance of individuals, but it's still not quite there. We see a lot of efforts going on right now in big organizations. Just this morning, we got a call with a global organization that wants to double their workforce size in the next 3 to 4 years, which is quite substantial. It's in the tens of thousands of people, right? And one of their things is their people are starting to use AI. I'd probably say it's like level 1, where they're prompting, they're like, playing around, but not like in the more advanced workflow type stuff, and really truly understanding how they can use AI to make better, faster decisions, no matter what job role they're in. And AI still isn't, still being used at big companies about 35-40% of the time. Smaller companies, believe it or not, less, just based on some of the latest data that we're seeing from our surveys and studies. But it's really important, and I think that you have to think about data literacy as well, even outside of AI. right? You have to understand, and you almost have to teach people how to be a certain level of a data scientist.
Yeah, that's true. I think we had some similar kind of anecdotes with how important data is in our lives, in the things that we read. When we read the newspapers, when we read the media, we need to be able to sift through one message and think about what the message actually means versus another message, and being able to discriminate between these things is very, very important. Interesting that you say that there's a company out there that's increasing its headcount, because that's kind of unusual in this age of generative AI, where a lot of companies are downsizing because they're thinking, well, AI can do these things or those other things. Is that a snapshot of one particular organization, or are you seeing trends across different companies where they're doing this kind of thing?
That particular organization is growing their AI practice. Okay, like a lot of professional services firms, we know Accenture, publicly they've grown their AI workforce by 100,000 and then some, right, as they grow. And Accenture, for example, is a company that has gone from $0 in revenue in AI consulting to well over $1 billion, I believe. So I think it's really interesting. Other organizations, several months ago, we saw Marriott lay off 900 people that were mostly in data analyst jobs, because they found that AI can do their job pretty quickly. So, I think that as companies invest in AI, they have to understand, you can't just put money into tools, but you have to just, understand how to truly leverage them. And some of what we're seeing sometimes is a lot of companies have all these great AI tools, but it's kind of like having a Ferrari, but you don't know how to drive a stick, right? It's just not going to work quite well. That's what we're seeing from our viewpoint here at the company.
Yeah, you don't know how to drive and there's no fuel in the engine. That's, I guess, the other analogy, one that I usually use, is the data is the fuel for the AI engine. So yes. With all of this, with companies growing AI practices and with human capital, I did another couple of podcasts this week where I was talking around this subject of the difference between human capital management, learning, and HR versus technical departments, IT departments, who are possibly driving some of this transformation. And how much of a priority is this for HCM versus how much is this a priority for businesses? Is there a split there, do we think? What do you think, Taryn?
Yeah, I was pausing to see if Mike had any thoughts, but so my initial reaction to that is they should be working together. They should not be doing these in silos, because in order to really meet the business goals that you're trying to accomplish, you have to have all of HCM behind you. You have to work in lockstep, because in order for your people to have the right skills, you have to know where you're going. Well, that's your strategy, that's your vision, that's the goals and objectives you're trying to accomplish as a business. So if you're not talking with HCM, they can't have the right people in place. And I don't mean just hiring, which is a piece of that puzzle. I mean, making sure that you're supporting and growing the people you have in place to be able to accomplish the things that you're wanting to accomplish. And obviously, thinking about whether you're hiring or you're laying people off also has a puzzle piece to it of thinking about and mapping out what are the tasks that AI can perform, or the tasks that my people can perform, and then figuring out where's that best connection with it, which is also what HCM can help you do. The business and HCM have to work in lockstep to figure this puzzle piece out together, and also to take advantage of the skill sets that you have in place. I'm going to keep, I know we go off when we start thinking of all these things that tie into it. And it's so true. This is so multifaceted. You can't do this in silos because of that. And so the other piece to this is, unfortunately, layoffs happen, right? But what is that major loss? Do you know what you're really losing when you're laying people off? Think about all of the collective knowledge that you have there. Would it or could it have been, for some organizations, better for you to skill your people in a different way and keep in all of the culture and knowledge and process and all of that history that your people have, and just being able to shift them, again, based on that puzzle piece and analysis of the tasks across AI and people? So that's where I start to think, is that this has to be a relationship. It has to be a collaboration between both. If they're doing it in silos, it's not going to help you achieve what you're really trying to ultimately achieve. So when I hear this separate, I'm like, oh no, we need to be together. We have to work together to make this real.
Yeah, no, it really is a bit of a slog. There's a term out there for trying to get a company ready for this. It's what's your data culture? The companies that are excel using AI have a phenomenal data culture. And by that, I mean, I'd say 95 to 99% of the decisions they're making is truly based on like data. Sales, of course, is an easy one, right? Learning has, done far better in terms of how you measure and go about things. But tying both of those groups together, business and HCM, Taryn and Ashwin, is, that's where the data culture has to come in. So I'd like to see more work on, how do you create like a data culture, right? How do you create everybody doing their jobs and driving performance off of the data that they're seeing every single week, right? Those are things that I'd like to see more of and see more thought about it. So I think companies do go into, hey, we're using AI, but you know what? Are you really? And what is your culture around that? And how are you improving things? Are you having your town halls every week to talk about some best practices in learning? I mean, I just spoke with you, Ashwin, just a couple of days ago, and you taught me a few things about AI. And I'm like, all right, well, I missed that. I better get back on the saddle and, make sure I'm learning and keeping up. Because as you know, it does change quite often.
Absolutely. And just to,